Hot mic, just, you know,
Yeah.
hot mic. Good? You guys ready?
Yes. Ready.
All right. So welcome everybody to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education meeting for January 25th, 2022. Ann, could you please call the roll?
Yes, Andy Duran.
Present.
Ann Hill, present. Mark Berry.
Present.
Carrie Steinbach.
Present.
Tim Penich.
Present.
Amy Connell Donahue.
Present.
Lauren Hirsch.
Present.
Great, so we've got a quorum, we can begin. And the first thing we'll do, as in every meeting, is we'll say our pledge. And we have some special guests who are going to start us off on the pledge, if you would. When you're ready.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great job, thank you. And because we have some special guests, students who got to get home, we're going to ask them to go before normally we do our public comment next, but we're going to go right to our Lake Bluff Elementary School report. Principal Bay will introduce her guests and get us started.
All right, good evening, everyone. We are waiting on one more student, so I'm going to take my time with our introduction, and we're hopeful that our additional presenter will arrive, because I know that that person plays an important role in what you're about to hear this evening.
We can
can
always
wait.
switch. if
Wait,
you
yeah.
want.
Why don't, do we want to
That might be
wait?
nice, so then we
Yeah.
don't
Go back to
feel,
the traditional, if that's okay.
I think that's safe.
Sure. All
Thank
right.
you.
So then we will pivot and go to public comment. And before we start, oh, I didn't save. Okay, I'm gonna have to wing it. I wrote myself a board book note, didn't save. So you can, anybody who'd like to make a public comment, please come to the podium and start by stating your name. And know that under typical circumstances, we limit public comment to 3 minutes, but Mr. Macnicki, is that how you pronounce your name? He specifically read our board policy and requested additional time, so he's allotted up to 5 minutes for public comment, so.
I appreciate that and thank you. Before I get started, I'm going to read a little quickly than I usually would. Forgive me, I've got a lot that I want to go through in the allotted time. Good evening. My name is Michael Macnicki, and I'm a Lake Bluff resident and father of a Lake Bluff kindergarten student and Park District preschool student. I want to first applaud the schools in the district on their commitment to staying open while providing rigorous instruction for our students. We are all very thankful for your hard work. As we reach almost 2 years of this pandemic, we need to begin questioning the mitigation measures that we put in place early on before we knew about the virus and its effect on children. Specifically, a sober discussion needs to be had about the documented negative effects of masking our children while attending school. I think we can all agree that the silver lining of this pandemic, if there is any, is that our children have been largely spared the severe complications that so many have suffered due to infection. This has been an irrefutable fact for over 18 months now. Currently, all children attending classes are required to wear masks. A few reasons why this requirement doesn't make sense at this time. The risk of severe illness due to infection is negligible. Cloth and surgical face masks are ineffective against airborne viruses. An infectious dose of COVID takes 27 minutes to transmit between people with cloth masks compared to 15 minutes without any masks. All masks are permeable when wet from spit, water, or humidity from breath. Vaccines have been available to kids for 4 months and adults for more than a year. Well-controlled real-world studies have not demonstrated any clear benefit of masking students. Dr. Fauci has acknowledged that everyone will eventually get COVID, and the younger you are when this inevitability takes place, the better off you are in regard to complication risks. What are some of the downsides of masking children? Mildew and bacteria can begin growing in a cloth or surgical mask within 30 minutes of becoming moist from breath or spit. Mask mandates are causing over 350% surge in childhood speech delays. My wife and I will be seeking speech intervention for our 3-year-old son. I'm not optimistic in that effort, as other parents have already expressed their frustration with even speech therapists wearing masks during intervention instruction. 75% of kids that don't overcome any reading lag by the 3rd grade struggle through the remainder of schooling. Children rely on facial expressions to interpret what they hear, lip reading to learn vocabulary and correct pronunciation, and they rely on seeing faces to read emotions for psychological development. Children are being treated as if they're vectors of disease. Suicide attempts in 12 to 17-year-old girls are up 51%. There are 0 long-term studies on masking kids and its effect on their respiratory, cardiovascular, or neurological development. During the school week, my daughter wakes 45 minutes before the school bus picks her up. She's home by 3:15 and in bed by 7:30 p.m. In 13 hours, she's awake on a weekday. She's forced to mask for eight of those hours. We know that the schools are safe, that COVID-19 does not spread on surfaces, that cloth masks are nothing more than facial decorations. We know that the very evidence cited by the CDC director on mask effectiveness in schools has been proven to be highly flawed. But most importantly, we know that the risk of severe disease from COVID-19 for our healthy children has always been low. And in the vaccinated children, COVID is much less dangerous than the flu. Forcing our children to mask any longer at this time is committing educational malpractice. What are the off-ramps or metrics that will allow our children to unmask? If the state or county is not willing to acknowledge or the current data and act, why are we relying on them for guidance? Do we not have the ability as a district or village to act in the best interest of our children and community? Just yesterday, the state of New York found mandatory masking in schools unconstitutional. New York districts now have the say in what's best for their community and its children. The writing's on the wall. Does District 65 want to be one of the last school districts in the country that still unnecessarily forces masking of the children in school? Or do we want to be a beacon and provide a roadmap to the rest of our state on how to return to normal life? Do we want to continue to ignore the damage being caused to our children, or do we want to stand up and speak in defense of them by calling out these ineffective and damaging policies? We need to begin to move to mask optional policy now. The need for normalcy at school is urgent. We should end mandatory masking no later than February 15th. This will allow schools to communicate and prepare for anxieties to fall as the Omicron peak subsides and for families to get their children fully vaccinated if they so choose. Making mask optional will always be controversial, be it a year, a month, or a week from now. Then why not today? Children have suffered enough. They've paid a steep price for our fear. It is our job to protect our children, not the other way around. One last thing, if I may. An advocacy toolkit was published yesterday, authored by virologists, physicians, pediatricians, and hospital directors of critical care. The toolkit's intended to help everyone who needs to make evidence-based decisions for pre-K, K through 12 schools, and extracurricular activities. It summarizes the most important data regarding COVID in children of all ages so you can be empowered. This toolkit can be found at urgencyofnormal.com. I'll email all board members a copy of this toolkit and hope that it provides everything needed to facilitate a move to optional masking in school. Thank you for your time and attention. I also printed a hard copy for our superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on unless there's other public comment.
We do have one written public comment.
Okay.
I oppose the mask mandate. At this point, we know that cloth masks do not provide any protection. Furthermore, masks cause serious mental and learning problems.
Okay. And no Zoom comment, I imagine? Okay. So we are going to move on to the opportunity for the board to add a future agenda item or a brief discussion item for this evening. Does anybody like to say anything? Have an item for a future agenda item?
I do.
Carrie.
Yes. I wrote it down because this is what I do. I'll flip all the words around. It won't make any sense, but I would love to have a discussion and reporting around maybe staff burnout and staff morale. Try to figure out what is required by state laws or just our county to figure out maybe what we can potentially reduce for their amount of work and give everybody a break. That's it. Told you I should have written it down.
And I would suggest an item as well. The board has heard me talk about this before. We need to begin the conversation about board governance and the future of board governance in Lake Bluff. I am stepping down from the board at the end of my term, which is April of 23. So this April will be about a year left, and perhaps the board might want to consider a change of board governance with a year left on my term. So I think we need to have that as a public discussion in the not too distant future. Any other items for discussion or agenda items? Not hearing any. We now move to recognition item, which Dr. Leali will take us through.
Yes. So I would like to personally congratulate Jay Khan, Jenny Sikora, and Tammy Robards, our Finance and Operations Department, on receiving the Association of School Business Officials International Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting Award for the FY21 school year for the annual comprehensive financial report. The participation in the program is a testament to the district's commitment to transparency and high-quality financial reporting. This is not the first time we've won the certificate. It's a testament to all of their work, and I just want to thank them on behalf of the district and community for not only being good stewards, but also making efforts to be transparent and make sure that we are doing the best for our community in terms of our resources. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Jay's our resident rock star, but we don't want to tell anybody because we don't want anybody to know how good he is.
You say it enough though, because he brags sometimes.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
But I'm still waiting for the entry music for when you do a finance report.
We've got some plans.
All right,
We've
good.
been talking about it.
And now we're going to switch things around just a little bit. And now, Ms. Bay, we have everybody we need. We're going to go to the elementary school report, and Principal Bay is going to introduce some people.
Okay, good evening. I am excited tonight to introduce our LBES student presentation for this month. I do want to be very clear, though, that I cannot take any credit for what you are about to see. But I do want to highlight some important points before these students get started. Our school-wide enrichment model is what allows time, energy, and teaching to be devoted to what you're about to see and hear this evening. I'm proud of the learning these students engaged in, and I'm grateful for the facilitation of learning led by Ms. Tivador and Mrs. Stoffer and what they were able to bring to this experience. So as we consider big ideas surrounding access and inclusion, I'm excited to introduce Ms. Tivador and this Lunch and Learn group to share their research and findings.
So this group of fifth graders has been working together during lunch and recess times twice a week over the last 4 months. And we are excited to be here tonight to finally share with you what we've been working on. When we learned that updates were being made to our front playground at Lake Bluff Elementary School, we knew that students would be interested in getting involved. These 6 students welcome the opportunity. We have 4 students with us tonight that are going to share a little bit more about what they've been doing.
I am Griff Michael. Yeah, we started with a guiding question. What changes could we be made to our playground to make it fun and accessible for our entire LBS community?
Our first step was to learn about the different disabilities. We read the book all the way to the top. We watched videos and we learned about the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA.
We looked at our current playgrounds and made observations. Finally, we interviewed teachers, administrators, and teaching assistants. This slide shows the staff that we interviewed. Each person had a unique perspective about the playground.
We also used a Google form to send a survey to LBS 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. We had 140 responses.
Wow.
After all the data gathering, we talked about what we had learned. Mr. Khan taught us about the budget and that some decisions were made and some were up to us. Mrs. Soler reminded us that students need quiet spaces, shade, and options. Mrs. Knickle and Ms. T told us about the things that students with special needs should have to be able to play like everybody else. Here are some of their recommendations.
Here are some of the results from our student survey. Third through fifth graders told us they used the swings, basketball courts, Gaga pit, the field, and the front concrete area the most.
This graph shows the equipment or spaces students liked least. The climbing wall, the spider web, and the monkey bars were the least liked pieces of equipment.
Students also told us that they would like to add shade and seating to the playground. Now we are going to talk about our recommendations. Adding the Omni Spinner is one of our recommendations because it has easy access to get in and out. Also, the spinning feeling in your stomach feels great to some kids.
We also recommend buying a chill spinner. This is a chair that spins and that is accessible to all. Again, people enjoy the feeling of spinning in their stomach.
We would also like to buy the rock and ring panel because it helps with tactile needs. It can also support creativity and making music. Our recommendation is to remove the climbing wall to make room for all this new equipment.
We also recommend adding the color splash panel because people with tactile needs will like it. We suggest purchasing the Skyways Hypershade. Students have been using the climbing wall shade. If the climbing wall is removed, the Hypershade, or something similar, would be larger so more kids can enjoy the shade. Mr. Khan taught us about the poured ground cover and that we could choose the color. We decided on a royal blue and teal. If the colors are too dark, it will become too hot under the sun. And if it is too light, it will fade easily.
Our task force research interviewed adults, surveyed students, and read and discussed new ideas to make this playground accessible and fun for everyone and to meet the ADA guidelines.
We hope that the district takes our recommendations and renovates the playground to meet ADA guidelines and kids' wishes too. Thank you for listening.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, that was amazing.
I have one question for whoever would like to answer. What was the hardest part for you when you were going through this exercise of doing these surveys and talking to your students? What was the hardest part?
For the surveys, probably making up the questions to ask other students.
How was it like working with Mr. Khan?
You can be honest.
Who fell asleep during the budget talk?
I'm just kidding.
That was very thorough, you guys.
Yeah, that was
Very well
amazing.
done.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for doing such a comprehensive job and talking to so many people because we absolutely needed your help and support to make sure that whatever we do with our playground is going to be something that our students need and want and reflect the kids in the Lake Bluff community. So thank you so much.
And when Mr. Khan and the rest of the administrative team brings a proposal, I imagine that's what's going to happen. We'll bring a proposal to this board for a playground. We will definitely look at what you guys have prepared for us to make sure that your ideas are incorporated because you know way better than we do what should be in the playground. So thanks very much. That was awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank
And
you.
thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Tivador.
What's the next project you're going to help us decide on? We should get more involvement, I think.
This is definitely a task force we can utilize more
Yeah,
often.
absolutely.
And thank you, Mrs. Tivador, for your hard work as well.
Oh.
We're on it. Big scissors for all.
Big scissors.
Yes. Thank you, guys.
So you guys don't have to stay. You're welcome to stay if you want, but no reason to stay. So do we have a PTO report and an Alliance report?
We have a PTO report, I think, but she's not online right now.
Okay.
No Alliance report tonight.
Okay. Is there a middle school report, Mr. Blackmer?
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Great. Well, I would like to first acknowledge what an awesome job those elementary school students did with their presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then I feel as though I should apologize because my report will be lame by comparison. So I apologize. But just a few things I wanted to mention. Lake Bluff Middle School is not unique in that student behavior over the course of the last few months has definitely been kind of a growing challenge and a concern among our staff. And certainly I've been involved in a lot of conversations with parents about some of the challenges we faced, and certainly working with a lot of students. And I want to acknowledge this at the middle school level as well as at the elementary level. We teach a lot of important topics and certainly a lot of important subjects, math and science and language arts and health and wellness and fine arts. It's all important, but at the same time, and in all those subjects, we're also teaching behavior. And so when we see things that we need to adjust to or pivot to, I do want to let the board know that we fully are prepared to do that and anticipate those sorts of things. And so at our faculty meeting tomorrow, one of the committees that's been in place for going on 4 years now is our foundations group. This is a group of teachers representing all of our different teams across the building. And one of the primary things that we do is look at our processes, look at our procedures, and look at the ways in which we respond to growing concerns and things that are happening throughout the building. And one of those things that we've been focusing on is student behavior. Wanting also to acknowledge that while our staff is just very well versed in responding to sort of those low level disruptions and minor things that can get us off track in a classroom setting, it's also worth remembering that there are times when students are not necessarily ready to be reflective and sort of engage on that sort of a dialogue. And so at tomorrow's faculty meeting, that committee is going to be sharing out some new and different processes that hold to that idea that behavior and behavior instruction and behavior intervention is as much a part of what we do day in and day out as some of our other academic and fine arts pursuits. So we'll be looking forward to trying some new things, extending upon some things that have always been in place. But we're going to be just continuing to adapt to some of the challenges we face. And I also want to be very clear. When I say challenges and behavioral challenges at Lake Bluff Middle School, as somebody who spent time in some other schools, we're really fine tuning and definitely making some adjustments to keep the building, unique and different. In that respect, a lot of the things that we're dealing with at the Lake Bluff Middle School level are nowhere near the sort of gravity or magnitude that some of the other schools face. We're just continuing to want to strive to be the best that we can. So looking forward to that. Wanted to just give the board a highlight of it, and I'll be happy to come back and share out more after some of those things have been implemented if you're interested in hearing how it's going.
Definitely interested in hearing about it. Thanks, Nate.
I agree. Yes.
All right. So we're going to circle back. I think we have a PTO report that is now going to be available, and Nicole Elliott, I believe.
Nicole, you're muted.
You're muted, Nicole.
There we go. Oh,
Nope,
still muted.
not yet.
There we go. There we go. Sorry for being late. Had a little bit to juggle. My husband went out of town unexpectedly. So all that said, I did want to go ahead and give an update with PTO. Things are going well. We've been meeting routinely and just wanted to kind of preface some things that we're going to be doing in terms of funding and kind of get some initial input and I guess some initial thoughts, because while we are still going to prioritize the funding of some initiatives and we have to vote on them, I wanted to get an initial read on two big things that the PTO and kind of the schools would like to do. One being at the middle school, there was the idea of helping to provide basically kind of a sport court idea and allow the students an area off of the parking lot to have recess, also use it for physical ed, and things of that nature. And I know that, this might also have some considerations from a village perspective, potentially a board perspective. And that's why I wanted to bring it up for discussion and see if there's anything that comes to mind of why we kind of investigate the planning for this, if there's anything we need to be aware of as we kind of begin this process. With those quotes that we would be getting, we would also look to replace the basketball hoops at the elementary school, because we've also been made aware that, those are aging and it would be nice to have adjustable ones, especially for the littles. And furthermore, at the elementary, I guess the big project to focus on there will be the courtyard and some revitalization and making it able to be used for a variety of reasons, some being science-based with different planting, some being to allow an additional outdoor space for learning and make it adaptive. And we're going to be seeking different ideas, and there's many within PTO who have volunteered to help guide these projects. But wanted to raise this to the board to see if there's any initial considerations or thoughts, concerns that need to be voiced now before we get too deep in the planning of this.
My only thought, thanks, Nicole, for sharing with us. My only thought is
Anything
that.
from anyone?
Can you hear us,
Can you hear me?
Nicole?
No.
Okay. If there's not anything, or if there is anything that is thought of after the fact from, oh, sorry, Shelley.
Can you hear us?
I can't hear.
Well,
Nate, can you still hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, just making sure.
oh,
Well,
Shelley-
perhaps,
Shelley's hard to hear because she's not in front of the microphone, but I can hear everyone else.
perhaps we could email or contact Nicole Elliott with our questions and have her follow up.
Nicole, can you hear us now?
My only comment, and that can be passed along, is that hopefully she is working with building administration to review these issues that they want to bring and bring it to the board, have the administrators bring it to the board along with PTO.
Yeah, I'm happy to update. So I do get to meet with the district PTO group every month. And then I know they meet also monthly with each building. And there have been separate meetings on each of these initiatives that Nicole just mentioned. And there's a lot of planning and working. Jay's been working on it. And everybody's being kept in the loop on all these projects. So absolutely, we are working together to make sure this is the right thing. But I think it's a good idea. If you have questions, email them to me and then I can send them on to Nicole.
Still can't hear us. Don't know how to sign language. Thank you.
I can text.
I just sent her a text.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Khan, do we have a business office report tonight?
I just wanted to mention that we got our preliminary health insurance renewal today, and it was 2% increase,
That's
which
it?
is outstanding.
Wow.
Actually, the NIHEP average was 8%, but we've
Wow.
had very good experience this last year, so we get a lower increase.
Yeah.
And we're working, the experience that's coming in right now is not good, so they're not expecting it to go down, but we're looking at a few other modifications we can make to the plan design to bring that increase even lower. So that's good news for
That's-
next year for us.
Yeah, over the years, what is typical? What have we seen in the past?
I mean, we've seen as high as 7 or 8% ourselves. Some districts are seeing 14, 15%. Like, I think medical trend is 6% for health insurance or for the healthcare portion, and then like 8% or 9% for the pharmacy part. So like an average of around 7 or 8. So it's a very good renewal.
Thanks. Any questions for Mr. Khan? Ms. Rorick, do we have a student services report tonight?
So last year we had an organization called Simply Be come work with our teachers and hold a parent event. Tomorrow, their social workers will be coming to work directly with our students. They'll spend a full day at the middle school teaching strategies on managing stress and anxiety. as well as they will experience yoga within their wellness classes. And then there is a parent event via Zoom tomorrow night at 7 p.m. And so the flyers went out to families. You do have to register online in advance. So that's all.
Thank you. Any questions for Tracy? All right, President's report. I don't do many of these, but I wrote something for tonight. So my report is all about perseverance. The word of the day, perseverance. And I am very specifically directing this report to each and every district employee, from administration to teacher to TA to guidance counselor to custodian to buildings maintenance to anybody I'm forgetting, every one of you. Perseverance. Webster's dictionary defines perseverance as that quality that allows someone to continue trying to do something even though it's difficult. The thesaurus suggests doggedness, persistence, persistency, tenacity, tenaciousness, pertinacity, perseveration, continuation, determination, and purpose as synonyms for perseverance. So as we've all witnessed, the impact of COVID in general and Omicron in particular has been beyond challenging and relentless. As we wind down one wave of the virus, we get slammed by another. All the relevant tracking metrics continue to paint a pretty bleak picture. We struggle to keep staff healthy enough to be in the classroom. We struggle to connect with students behind masks. We struggle to find substitute teachers to fill in when staff is out sick. We struggle to find teaching assistants to provide the support that is necessary. We struggle to find bus drivers to bring our kids to school. Our custodial staff struggles to maintain a healthy environment for our kids. Our administrators are wearing so many hats and covering so many different roles that they barely have time to breathe. Our support team is understaffed, overwhelmed, and covering for one another. And these are just a few of the logistical challenges our team is facing every single day just to keep kids in school, to keep the buildings open. It feels completely overwhelming. And I'm not even in the buildings, and it feels overwhelming just to hear the stories that I hear. As you may have seen in the news from many districts, these challenges are insurmountable. They are overwhelming. And yet Lake Bluff schools persevere. Our entire team perseveres, every one of you. You continue to show up and get the job done every day. You continue to do what is right for kids and somehow find a way to keep our schools open. Honestly, I don't know how you do it, but I'm so grateful and appreciative that you can do it. I'm grateful how important this work is to all of you, how seriously you take this work. Unfortunately, I'm not sure exactly what I as an individual can do to help, but in light of these seemingly unrelenting challenges, I wanted to recognize and draw attention to this incredible quality of perseverance, a quality that is exhibited in abundance by all our district employees. Every one of you, you are all amazing. Thank you for all you do. You're all role models. Our kids are watching you and they will learn from your actions. Please keep up the great work and keep on persevering. So just wanted to say, everybody's amazing and I really appreciate everything you do. Some of the board might have something to chime in on that too.
I think you make an incredible point there, Mark. And, you know, I have children in both buildings, and to see the staff and the teachers and the administration show up every day and do all that you're doing is really impressive. And I don't think you hear thank you enough. So thank you.
And to piggyback on that, same thing. I've got kids in both buildings with everything everybody is going through to come every day with a smile on your face. That shows, and the kids feel it and they feel the love and they are happy to be there. And truly it's possible only because of you guys. So thank you very much for everything.
And as a parent who was very happy to have the kids out of the house, thank you from the parents.
Yeah, as a parent and a board member, community member, there's not enough that I could, any of us can say, I think, to express our gratitude. My son's in first grade and he told me about an afternoon where he had a parade of different teachers taking him to classes and everything. And I know that's not ideal, but when he told me the story, it just made me feel, made me feel good knowing what a great team that the teachers work together to cover for each other. And it's a good example for our kids, and I appreciate everything everyone is doing. So thank you.
All good. All right, so now we're going to move on to our superintendent's report.
I don't know how I'm going to follow that, but thank you. On behalf of the team, I just want to thank the board for your support. It's felt. I just can say that, and I don't know that every team can say that, but we feel your support, we feel your encouragement, and we know that you are thinking with kids first, and that's where our heads are always at, and so we appreciate that. The community is lucky to have your leadership. My report tonight, as a matter of compliance, we have now your updated mandated reporter forms on file that you signed tonight. We'll also be assigning you a training module on mandated reporting. It doesn't take very long, but I think it's good for everyone to just be reminded of what the requirements are as a mandated reporter. Shifting gears, an update on our Thrive initiative. The subgroups have met to generate and design surveys that will be distributed to community members, about 400 community members randomly chosen in the village, parents and students. We will monitor our staff DEI perceptions through the survey that we started last year. So we'll give that one again this spring. And we will be sending an invitation out shortly for community members and parents to participate in some focus groups. So we're really, really working hard to get an accurate picture of how our parents, community members, students feel like we are serving them, and whether or not we're being effective in what we're trying to do. And that's really the goal of that work. So you will see those invitations before they go out. Encourage you to encourage others if they get the invitation to participate. We've been working with the village to have names of people who aren't affiliated with our system so that we have some parents in the group with kids coming into the system, and then also those who have had students in the system, as well as working with the high school to get some alumni in there too. So we're really trying to get a well-rounded perspective to guide our efforts in creating an action plan by the end of this year. That's our goal. That's some steps that are concrete and actionable. And then finally, as we always do, want to give a quick COVID update. So we obviously are still being impacted by COVID in our schools. As a reminder, we are still under the governor's mask mandate and quarantine mandates. We do recognize this is difficult for some in the community and our staff, and especially our students. Both of these mandates are being challenged currently in a class action lawsuit in Illinois. Our district, I want to be clear, is not directly named in the lawsuit. So there are neighboring districts that are and have been named, so they've been directly involved. But we have been monitoring the case as it's progressed, and we anticipate that when a verdict is returned, no sooner than Friday the 28th was the last update that I had heard. But when a verdict is returned, we will be impacted in some way, depending on the outcome of that case. So as an administrative team, we're prepared to address any changes the way we have been approaching our decision-making throughout the pandemic. We'll be monitoring case levels in our community. We'll continue to consult with our attorneys and insurance cooperative, the local health department, and to take into consideration any other local metrics if we're given the flexibility to change any of our mitigation strategies. As you may remember, earlier this school year, before Omicron, you may recall that I sent a letter to the governor proposing a decision-making process or matrix that would include community vaccination rates and incidence rates as a means to determine any adjustments to mitigation, specifically masking. I still believe that's a solid way to think through these decisions. However, if we're going to be changing anything, it will come to the board as an administrative recommendation first, as we've been doing since we planned our first return to learn plan. So before anything changes in our schools, you will have the opportunity to hear the recommendation, ask your questions, have a discussion, and then give us the green light if you feel that that's a good recommendation, as long as we're given that opportunity. There are ways that this could go where we would maybe not have an opportunity to have local decision-making one way or another. And if that's the case, then I will obviously update you on what we feel like we can control and our recommendations at that point, and we'll move on from there. Any questions on that?
two quick questions. First on the survey with Thrive to the community members, will they get an explanation of what it is? Because I've seen past surveys where it just comes to your phone and it's not really clear if it's real or not. So
Yeah, that's a good point. So we're gonna I'll make a note of that, especially for the ones that are not parents in
Yeah,
the school
yeah.
district, to make sure they get some background information when it goes to them.
Okay, and
Thanks for
then to jumping to COVID, does the county have like vaccination rates by zip code and everything?
We don't have it by zip code,
Okay.
but we do have it as a county, and we're in
Okay.
the high 70%
Yeah.
for at least one dose. And I believe we're around 65 or 70% fully vaccinated. I do want to make a distinction though at this point. Fully vaccinated is not the language that's being used anymore. Now it's being called up to date with your vaccinations. And what that means is any vaccination that's been recommended for you based on your age group or medical conditions, including boosters. So if a booster has been recommended for you, then you are not up to date on your vaccinations unless you have 2 doses and a booster. And that is impacting the quarantining and things like that. So especially for staff. So as a point of clarification, but yes, we do have that information as a county, and that's what I would have to rely on. Although we have been collecting the vaccination information, I think it'd be more relevant if parents were giving us just a really accurate picture of who's up to date here, because that would help us to know what's best for our local community.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I just want to point out a reminder that we had, in response to the idea of the administration coming to the board with a recommendation, and you talked about, you referenced some of the ideas you had from a decision-making matrix, right? And we had guidance from our legal advisors, our law firm, about how this is not really a board decision. We support administrative recommendations. If it was a board decision, we would have to come together for special meetings all the time. And you'd have, the data changes constantly. We're not in a position to make those day-to-day decisions that some boards across the state do. But we've made the decision, and our legal team has recommended that we defer to our administrators' recommendations, and it's fine to challenge them on those ideas, but it's their decision. So just want to remind everybody of that.
Absolutely.
Okay, anything else? All right, so we're going to move on to discussions and presentations. The first item of business is a pre-K planning discussion, and Tracy Rorick will provide an update on potential changes to our early childhood and pre-K programs and financial impacts of this change.
Yes.
Take it
Well,
away.
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to say thank you for those kind words. Greatly appreciated. And we continue to put one foot in front of the other and move forward. So let's talk about 2022-23. So I want to talk about some considerations for our pre-kindergarten programming and start with some current trends that we're seeing. The chart that you see here has to do with special education referrals at the preschool or pre-kindergarten level. And to just give you some background, there's a number of ways that we receive special education referrals at this age. So a referral can be made by a parent where they email, call, or contact the school or myself in some way to state that they have concerns and they would like to request an evaluation. They can also call, state that they have concerns, and schedule a screening where they come in and work with our pre-kindergarten team, go through a series of activities, and then we determine if there's any areas of concern. Another way that students come to us is through the state, through the early intervention program, where they may have been receiving services from the Birth to 3 program. And as they transition and turn 3, then we hold meetings to determine if they are eligible for school-based services. And then the last way is for students who are in our pre-kindergarten program. If teachers or specialists work within the classroom start to notice that maybe there are some concerns in a specific area, they can also make a referral. So the data that you see here are some trends from the last few school years. In the 18-19 school year, we had 4 students who were referred based on screenings or parent request, and 5 students who entered through our pre-kindergarten or our early intervention program into our pre-kindergarten. In the 19-20 school year, you'll notice that the numbers are a little bit smaller, but that is due to the pandemic. A lot had closed down for those couple of months. And we weren't receiving referrals for those last 3 months of the school year. So we had 3 students who came through our screenings or parent request and 3 students who we received through early intervention. Last school year, our numbers stayed about what I would consider within our average or typical range, with 5 students coming through our screening or parent request for referral and 3 coming through earlier intervention. What you'll see this year is we have experienced quite an increase in our screening requests and students who are moving forward through that process, requests from parents for evaluations, and students who are coming through early intervention. And so right now we have evaluated or are in the process of evaluating 17 students for special education and related services. I've also spoken with my counterpart at early intervention, and their quote was they have also seen an uptick in referrals, mostly in the area of speech and language and social interactions. So what we're really seeing is that due to many of the closures of preschools, daycares, even the ability for parents to bring their young children to playgrounds, the McDonald's to play, really just out and about and have those language-rich experiences and social interactions, we're now starting to see the impacts of that. So what we are considering at this time would to increase our pre-kindergarten 3x1 section and our pre-kindergarten 4x1 section. So we have a few considerations when we think about increasing by a full section. We have staffing increases. When we increased our pre-kindergarten the last time, which we did a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we decided that we would hire 1 teacher and 1 teacher assistant. In our current pre-kindergarten program, there are 2 teachers in the classroom, 1 general education teacher and 1 special education teacher, along with at least 1 assistant, sometimes more, depending on the student needs in the classroom. If we were to add another section, we would likely use the model that we used a few years back, where it would not be a co-taught class. It would have 1 teacher and 1 teacher assistant. But we also need to think about some other staffing considerations. So our pre-kindergarten students do participate in specials, such as going to the library, going to wellness class, and going to music class. So we would consider the impacts of them attending specials, and then our increases in special services. So if they have English language needs, speech and language needs, occupational therapy needs, and social work needs. All of those are being considered right now in the development of a plan. We also know that we have a finite amount of space in our buildings. And so Kelly Bay, Audrey Jurov, and I have been discussing and collaborating on ways that we would be able to find classroom space in order to house another section. And we believe we have some really good ideas and really solid ideas in order to make that happen. Students who are in our pre-kindergarten program also use our transportation, which has midday routes. So our morning class leaves at about 10:40 a.m. And then our pre-K 4 class arrives at about 12:10 p.m. And so we need to consider some of the transportation pieces that go along with this, and then any additional supplies. Now, fortunately, we do still have the supplies that we used in our previous extra section of the pre-kindergarten program. So the amount of supplies we would likely need to purchase should be on the lower end, because we can still utilize those pieces that are still in storage. All right, and so Jay was kind enough to put together some financial information. Jay, would you like to talk about this piece?
Sure.
All right.
This is just a really rough estimate. Depends on who we hire and some other things, but it would probably cost, I'd say between $120,000 and $150,000 to add a section. When you have the salary and benefits of your teacher and your assistant. The last time we increased we added a section, we had a lot of preschool kids on those midday routes, and it's a long bus ride for little kids. And so they were falling asleep and missing their stops and having accidents. And it was like Jean and Sophie had to ride the bus with the kids. I actually happened to be on vacation during this beginning of school, and I'm still living it down. She will never forgive me for it. We just didn't expect.
I had two on that bus.
We did not expect that to happen, or didn't anticipate it. So we will likely need to add some midday routes to keep the number of kids on the buses to a manageable level, which would be another like $38,000 of bus cost. And then as Tracy said, many of these kids are identified as needing services and they would not pay tuition. So we are expecting maybe 25% of the kids to be paying tuition, which would bring in an extra $30,000 of revenue, offsetting some of those increases in costs. This assumes no increase, nothing for any supplies or that we have the space, and we have the space needed.
So in considering this and knowing the impacts that COVID has had, we truly believe that our school is the best place for our students to come and learn. We know that for many students, we will still need to provide the supports and services as identified through an IEP, but we have many students who have not been able to attend a pre-kindergarten program or have not gone back to daycare or not been able to go out and have those really language-rich experiences, and we can provide that in our schools. And so we will provide a memo to the board outlining our proposal and a recommendation for an additional section for pre-K.
And I'm sorry if I missed this. In terms of a section, does that mean one AM section, one PM section, combining to make one full-time section?
Yes,
Okay, I just want to make sure I
exactly.
understood it.
Mhm.
Okay.
How many sections do we have at each pre-K level? Or, like, we have 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds and pre-K? or how
Just
does it work?
one full-time class. So it's pre-K 3 in the morning, pre-K 4 in the afternoon. So right now we are able to have about 15 students in each class. We do hold spots. We don't fill the classes at the beginning of each year because we know we will identify students throughout the year. And if, depending on the services that a student needs, if they require a learning behavior specialist to support them, then they need to come into our program. There are some services that we can provide through an itinerant model, which means they just come to the school to receive that particular support. So we do have some students in pre-K who go to a different pre-kindergarten program and come to us just for speech and language once or twice a week, depending on what their IEP states. But the more students we can have in our program, we just feel like we can better service them, as there are times where there might be a family that wants to come into our program, but we don't have the space. So they have to come as an itinerant student rather than being a full-time student in our program.
And do we cap the classes at a certain number of kids?
So there's not an official cap. There's some state guidelines around pre-kindergarten programs and how many staff are in the room compared to how many students are in the room. We generally start with about 12, and then we like to go up to 15. We can put 16 in a classroom.
Tracy, I might have missed this. So these are kids within our district that are coming out of the early intervention?
So some are coming out of early intervention.
Or other places? but
Yep,
they're
some
in our
are being
district.
identified through our own screening. So we post our screening dates at the Park District and the community on our website. And so families can call and schedule a screening. And if there are concerns that come up through the screening, then we move them on to what's called a domain meeting and talk about what areas of evaluation we might need to complete. parents do still have the right, even if a child passes all areas of screening, to still request an evaluation if they are still concerned. And so the screening at times helps parents feel at ease that their children are learning and growing the way expected. But there are still times where we still receive a request for evaluation.
So the 17 kids that we're referring to right now, if we didn't have a room for them, we would provide the services or they would go somewhere else?
Correct. So what we do right now is if a student is identified, let's say for special education services through a learning behavior specialist, we will slot them into one of the held slots in our classroom. If, let's say, our classes are getting pretty full and they require speech and language, we just sign them up to come in just for that speech and language support.
But at this point, given the speech and language caseload that we have right now, we would be looking to add probably additional staff to make those minutes as well, if we needed to.
For
correct?
speech and language, yes, I think
Regardless of whether or not we offered that program.
Correct. The highest number of minutes are coming through speech and language. We know that, again, students haven't had the same language rich experiences that they've had in the past, and that is impacting either through social interactions or speech articulation and intelligibility. And so we will be looking at our caseloads with our speech language pathologists and seeing where we need to shift and add.
So regardless, if we did the class or not, we have to put those people in place because we have to provide the services.
Correct. The special services staff, either way, we'll have to look at their caseloads, regardless if we open this section or not. Another piece that I just want to share that will be in the proposal is that in our grades K through 8, we have to look at our percentage of students with IEPs that are in a classroom so that there's no more than 30% of students identified as needing special education within one classroom. In the early childhood level, that number is 50%. And so with what we're seeing here, if we were to have all of our students come to us and we only have the pre-K 3 and pre-K 4, we very likely would be over that 50% level. Now, there are options for some waivers through the state, but we would like to be able to provide classrooms that, meet that criteria.
For the staff, sorry.
Mhm.
For the staffing, I know you said one teacher, one assistant.
Mhm.
Do you anticipate having appropriate staff for specials? Or do you, so
Mhm.
what we have now is enough for specials, but to add in that extra section?
We believe so. We've had some preliminary meetings looking at where this would fall with specials. So each specials teacher is different with how full their kind of load is, depending on if they see students once a week, twice a week, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes. So each are a little bit different. But we were able to fit the one half day in previously, and we do believe that we could fit another half day in with specials. Takes a lot of creativity, but.
I think you just answered my question. So you talked about at one point we had added in an extra section.
Yes.
Did we then take that section away and we
Yes.
would be adding?
So they
back.
started as a pre-K 3 when we had a year where we had quite the wait list for students wanting into the pre-K 3 class. That next year, those students looped into a pre-K 4 and we did not keep the pre-K 3. We just put it up to pre-K 4. And then once those students went into kindergarten, then that half-day section was eliminated.
I do want to just mention one other less obvious financial impact, but early intervention is one of the best practices for addressing student concerns, academic concerns, and social emotional learning that there is. So early intervention is pretty much the gold standard. And so when we do this right, and we have a fantastic pre-K team,
We are very
when we
lucky.
do this right and we intervene early, the cost later of intervening after a student has demonstrated that they have deficiencies is much higher and much more time intensive and takes a lot more work. So the goal for us should be always to intervene early if we can, so that we avoid that extra work an expense, quite frankly, later in their career.
I appreciate you bringing that up because I was going to ask, and I didn't want to put anybody on the spot because you can't quantify it just yet, but in your proposal to the board, who would address that philosophically somehow, how this is a long-term investment in these kids and will probably prove to be less expensive, providing their future than it would be.
Yes, there's a
later on.
lot of evidence of early intervention. It might not be specific to our particular school, but I think there's a lot of data that we could present that shows that there's long-term impacts that are very positive and that our students would benefit from by adding this additional section.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions?
Just a quick question. You said there's enough space. Do you, at the school, do you anticipate the need for any like other upfront costs, like for renovations or something or is the space like ready to go?
Yeah. So again, lots of creativity. But I think we will be able to without any renovation at this point. The last time, a few things we needed to do were to bring in some extra cubbies and some other, pieces of furniture. But we don't anticipate any actual like construction or renovation to be needed in order to make this happen. So that's what we're looking at right now.
Thank you.
Just one other really easy one. Will the slides from this be included in the deck or in the board packet after? Because I don't think they're in there now.
Yes, we can include those in the
Okay,
public
that'd be
packet.
great.
Thank you for that.
Okay. All right, great.
Thanks,
Thank
Kristen.
you.
Appreciate it. All right, the next item would be Mr. Khan in the business office talking about student fees for the 22-23 school year.
Okay. You had a memo in your board packet, and I am gonna put it up on the screen. Just so I can refer to some of the charts, but we're currently looking at all of our fees, recommending that we hold fees constant for next year. This is kind of the history of our fees. What we adopted a methodology several years ago by where we tally up all of the tech and material costs and then look at a split between the district and the fee and the family. And we have been targeting about 40% of the cost being board paid and 60% of the cost being borne by the family. This is particularly because many, although everyone pays taxes, many of the residents do not have children in the school. So this sort of has the people who are getting the service are bearing a little bit higher burden of the cost. And this is typically done in many districts. I also have in your board packet just some of our comparable districts. We look at these districts when we look at salaries and benefits of our staff. And because they're neighboring districts, they're all high-performing districts, and we want to kind of be comparable to them and not be out of line. And so we are looking at the only fee that we're expecting or that we're asking to increase is the pre-kindergarten tuition. We look at our Lake Bluff Park District, and they have a 5-day program, and they charge $4,500 for tuition. Lake Forest District, I think, is at $4,250, but they have not announced their fees for next year yet. And I just feel like with the services that we provide in the district, that we should be comparable to a Park District program. At the same cost, I think we're still a better value than the Park District program. And then, as I said earlier, identified students do not pay that tuition. That's only an optional program for people.
So I have a question. The price increase for pre-K from 4,100 to 4,500, is that included in the budget that we approved? Was that increase? Cost?
So I have not done the budget for next year yet.
Okay, so
that would be next year's budget. This year, all of our costs are in, and we charge the 4,100. So
41, okay.
If it is approved, I will factor it into next year's budget.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking is I know it's only a 10% or so increase, like 10% exactly, I guess, increase. We had a pretty big jump from 1819 to 1920. And I don't know if in this environment with inflation the way it is and families under extra strain, if now's the time to be doing it. I just want to raise the question. It struck me when I first saw it as I'm a little uncomfortable with it. Doesn't mean it's not right. I'm uncomfortable with it, given the nature of the world. So I just want to throw that out there.
The only other thing I wanted to point out was when I did the calculation, it actually came out to be a fee of about $215. But I was including this year's budgeted costs.
Okay.
And I believe that we probably will come in a little bit under budget. We look at a 5-year average of all of our costs because not all of our costs are spread evenly. Every third year, we buy an extra class set of Chromebooks. So some of the fees are kind of lumpy. And we also don't want to be changing fees constantly. So we look at kind of a long-term average to smooth it out. So given those things, I think even though the calculation suggested to go up to 215, I'm recommending keeping it flat for one more year and seeing where the costs actually come in this year.
Yeah, because if you compare the total numbers, it's about a 20% increase in our costs in the
Right,
technology
from the
material.
budgeted, from last year's actual to
Yeah.
this year's budget, correct. So I think there's a little bit of cushion in there. And then also, again, just the extra set of Chromebooks was driving that. So we look at a longer term average.
Any questions?
I have a quick question. It's correct. We're not required to provide busing to any student, even those who live a certain
That is correct.
distance away.
It depends on the type of district that you are. We're a type of district that is not required to provide transportation services unless it's in an IEP.
Okay.
Anybody else? Continuing with Mr. Khan, building use fees for the next school year.
Our building use fees have been fairly consistent. We have outlined different groups of renter or user of our district. So really, we don't charge any school district affiliated group, PTOs, alliances, any student organizations. We like to give, basically it's a community resource. We want our community to use it. So community groups, we also do not charge, as well as nonprofit organizations who wish to use our building that serve the local community. So a nonprofit from the area. The only group that we really charge for using our buildings are for-profit groups that don't meet any of those other criteria. We don't really have a lot of use of our buildings, particularly from those groups. We get much more of the community groups and school district groups using our building. And for those groups, for the community groups, we really just charge the cost of a custodian. So we do need to have someone on site to supervise. And so we sometimes have the Girl Scouts use it, or the New Vision Athletics use our buildings quite a bit. And we just charge them, basically pass along the cost of the custodial supervision and maintenance and cleaning for the staff. And that's at a rate of $40 per hour because those are overtime hours. So we're asking to keep our fees the same, community use fees the same at $75 per hour for Group D, which is the for-profit groups, and then maintaining the pass-through of incremental costs for the other groups at $40 an hour for the custodians.
Any questions for Mr. Khan?
Is any outside, sorry, I could look at the policy, but is any outside group, are they required to provide insurance for themselves?
Yes, all the groups who use our building are required to use a certificate, provide us with a certificate of insurance, naming us as an additional insured.
Thank you.
Anybody?
Real quick question, just because it was brought up earlier by Nicole about potentially doing a sports court and or fixing the basketball hoops at the elementary school. Does that fall under this realm of building? Because like I could see it being used just by kids in the community during the weekends.
Yeah. We would not, we wouldn't be able to control kids using it. A good example would be like our field to the east of the middle school. We do Lake Bluff baseball uses that field, and we don't charge them for that use. There's no need for a custodian or anything like that. They just need to provide us a certificate of insurance.
Okay.
So if a group wanted to use our sport court, we would require that they are insured, but people from the community using it would just use it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, we're going to move on to our item 8D, which is our tri-district legislative advocacy work, and our advocacy committee or team, Andy and Amy, have been working with representatives from District 115 and 67 in Lake Forest to partner on some advocacy issues. And Andy's gonna, and we talked about it a little bit at our last board meeting, and Andy's gonna take us through some of that tonight. And just before you start, I would suggest that it's not in the board packet, but when we're done, if we could put it in the board packet
Yes.
to memorialize it for the future.
Yep, we will include those.
Before you guys get started too, I just wanted to say thank you. You were very gracious with all of our feedback last time and really took it into consideration. And I appreciate the way that you handled it and the follow-up that you sent out. So thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Well, that being said, I'll back up a little bit. We were sort of thrown onto a moving train and tried to jump on so we weren't left behind. I think that's the best analogy I can give. And realized that while there was some benefit to doing that, we really had some homework to do ourselves, meaning not just our committee, but our board, having never really gotten into this work. So you've seen this document, I think Lisa sent around yesterday, and there's an overview that talks about that. What we did was basically, before I had even had any conversation with the other districts, just wanted to know what is it that we're doing, what is it we're not doing, what's our goal, what's our intention, what are our intended outcomes. So some of that was driven through this discussion that we had at the board meeting, so it was in discussion with individuals. But I don't want to go through all this because I know that you all have read it many times since you got it. But basically the driving influencers are guiding principles for everything. I want to be really clear about the intention of the work, and I will go over this really quickly because this was a big discussion point for us last time. The intention of the work is really simply to build working partnerships with our neighboring districts, to create a supportive network for discussion and collaboration, to build effective working relationships with state legislators. I'll say something more about that in just a minute, and to align on priorities that are common in importance, because there will be priorities that are common in importance among all our districts, but not just those. We also want to advocate for priorities and or local control of some mandates, but also ones that we determine that may not be important to other districts and some they want to work on that aren't important to us. So that being said, the intention of the work is not to exclusively advocate for priorities that are common to us all, to try to align every single issue, because that's not going to happen. We also obviously want to build solid, healthy, effective relationships with legislators. There's a real strategy to that, but not to have those be combative in any way. So and our approach to that can be completely different than 115 and 67's approach or any other approach. This is really just about our ability to work with them when the opportunity arises and where we can align on certain things. So the outcomes are listed here. I don't want to go through those one by one, but if anybody has any questions about those, I will be happy to talk about it. I will say one thing that's coming next is a document that'll be a strategy document on just building, how does a board of education build an effective relationship with legislators? Because I know that Dr. Leali is meeting with legislators and talking to legislators, and some of us maybe are on our own individually, but as a group, what are the strategies that we want to execute? So we'll talk about that at a later date. But some pretty clear outcomes here, I think, that we've brainstormed together. The next step listed here is to revise the document that was put in front of us on December 14th. So you also received that updated document, and this I did talk to John Noble at 115 about, and they're very happy with the way it turned out. Basically, I didn't change a whole lot. I think framing up our own work and intention behind it answers a lot of the concerns and questions we had, but I did change a few things. And rather than go through a red line edition, I'll just highlight a couple. One, I added a preamble sentence essentially that just says, while some state mandates have proven to be effective, there are others that have become irrelevant. So we're not saying, oh, they've all been irrelevant. They're not saying there's not some that we want to still work with, but it's saying that we have to acknowledge that maybe some don't work. I added a lot of clarifying adjectives. So I added some things like, instead of just saying, we're saying that certain mandates we would look at, not that they're all inclusive. So you'll see in here, I think the language is a little bit clearer and freer. But again, we can make some changes. I have a really good relationship with 115. I know, Amy, you've had some conversations with John through the process as well. And they pretty much will, I think at this point, unless it's a complete start over, will happily adopt what we send in this.
It's been very accommodating.
Yeah, and they've seen this and they're fine with it. I think, I want to clarify though, that what we're looking at here is not the end all be all. This is just things that when initially, Dr. Leal, you were part of the conversations, Dr. Montgomery and Lake Forest was part of the conversations. What are things important to the administration and to the boards to at least start on?
So this is the train.
And this is the train. Yeah, this is the train. The other part is the buying the ticket, I guess. But this is the train, and this is a way for us to at least frame our work and have a way to operate off of something that makes sense. So I think that's all I probably need to say. I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Well, I was just gonna say that I feel like the preamble is hopefully puts some of us at ease, because it really does. I think that was the biggest concern. It really does say some work, some don't, which I think was a big part of it. And so I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
Saying that right up front.
So the feedback from the people in the other districts was so far so good?
Yeah, no problem. They're curious how how our discussion goes tonight, but if we're good with everything, I mean, this document is just one small piece of the work. I don't want us to get lost in that. I think I said that last time. This is just one very small piece. Let's talk about some things together and let's see where that leads us. Not at all the end of the work, not at all even the main bulk of the work, just a piece of it in a way to get started with some things that are already moving. So any questions about the discussions, the work in general?
And to be clear, that's the document we're voting on later on, the approval of that document, right? The work with 115 and 67.
I don't know the answer to that specifically. I think I guess, yes. I would say that we also probably need to, if it's a resolution of some sort, these driving influencers, the intention is this. I think we need to somehow solidify that that's actually, so we can go back and point to it and say, yeah, this board meeting, we decided this was where we were going to go. I don't know if we're ready to do that tonight, if that's part of the agenda item or
Well,
not.
the specific motion for tonight's work is with the advocacy work with 67 and 115. But we can definitely, maybe a future agenda item. How do we refer to the other piece? The priorities, our own
legislative strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's do that and revisit that at the next meeting or an upcoming meeting.
sounds good. Any questions about either? Then?
I just will say that I do like the language that you put in, particularly that preamble that I noticed. And I thought overall, it sat better with me when I read it again. And so I appreciate you doing another take through. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you both very much for all your work on this. And I really appreciate the framework document kind of clarifying our board's goals. I think that's very important and it helped me better understand our goals. So as far as the shared document with the other districts, I read it several times and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I don't know if this is the right time, I guess, to ask some questions about some of the, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding some of the things just because I don't, the state funding and everything is still, I'm still haven't quite grasped, but
none of us have, but maybe Jay.
I'm still working on it too.
But yeah.
So we're considered a tier 4 district because of how the level of funding that we have. And it's correct that as a result of, I assume our local funding, we get less funding from the state as opposed to tier 1, 2, and 3.
That is correct.
And that's all part of the evidence-based funding formulas, kind of the newer school funding formula, I guess that's like a few years old. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so
okay.
Really, evidence-based funding really quickly, they have 26 different measures of a school district. Like, for example, number of English language learners, number of free and reduced, lower income. And then because it requires a different amount of resources to address all the different things, and it's all research-based. They pick a class size that's optimal for different grades, and they take your district and they basically calculate what they say is an adequate amount of money to educate your population. And then they look at how much money you have in comparison to what they deem as adequate, and then that ratio determines what tier you're in. And so we're in tier 4.
Okay.
But adequate is just what that means. It's just adequate. It's not
Okay.
what you might consider to be appropriate.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood that.
Just as a frame of reference.
Yeah.
When early on, when I was here, a few years back, the notion that North Chicago schools were in extreme financial difficulty and might be dissolved was a national conversation we were having. And then evidence-based funding was approved. And it, like Jay's saying, it's not perfect. It hasn't solved everything, but it has allowed them to continue to be an entity. So it makes a huge difference. There's still a lot to do, but it does actually have a positive impact. So.
And then, thank you, Mark, for that, and Jay. I just had a question, and I don't know if you've gotten this far, Andy and Amy, but with regards to pension reforms, like I don't know what kind of the vision or idea was that, or are we just saying like something needs to be done?
It's that.
Okay.
We haven't gotten that far with it.
Okay.
I think these are things that were some highlighted by board members, some highlighted by administration, superintendents. Saying these are things that and I'm new to this work as it relates to educational policy and advocacy, but I think that in our state, and PTEL is a good example, there are things that haven't really been looked at or evaluated for decades. And I think these things listed here are opportunities to encourage the state, through relationships with legislators to take a look at some of these things and say, can we measure that they're effective or not? Can an example, Lake County was the very first, it's been 30 years since Lake County was part of the initial PTEL, it's all the collar counties, I think. And nothing's really changed, and there's really no way to know if it's even effective. So I think that's just a way to look at those things and bring them out when not a lot of school districts are asking that.
And I was glad you brought that up, because that was an addition I thought was really good and positive, because it's been around, and if it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, I think that's important to look at. So thank you both very much for listening to concerns last time. And for working with other districts and putting this together. I know it's a lot of work, but it's very much appreciated. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for everyone's comments and feedback. I think the positive thing is this is just one of now many ways our boards are working together. I look at Portrait of a Graduate and lots of other things that have and will be happening. I think, that's a big change from where things were, and it kind of keeps those lines open. So.
We had that reminded me, we updated on that Portrait of a Graduate. We had a pretty phenomenal response from the community.
We did. We had an excellent response. We're still working on filling out our group. So I'm not ready to present the final group for Lake Bluff, but we actually wound up, Matt and I had a discussion, Dr. Montgomery, about just accepting anyone who volunteered. Because Battelle for Kids has been actually working with very, very large group on strategic planning and projects like this. And for an example, I think they've worked with the entire state of North Carolina or something on their state planning. And so that was hundreds of individuals. And we thought we had a good sized group that wanted to put their voices into this process. And so we've accepted anyone who applied. However, we do want to make sure we have a really representative group of all the different constituents in our community. And so we're still working on filling out with some additional names. I'll be ready to present on that at our next meeting.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments on any of that discussion item? Those discussion items? All right, so we're going to move on to our action items with discussion.
I had one more thing. Item E, just a quick update.
Sorry.
As we sent out to the community, we are updating the
skipped
product.
the whole thing. I'm sorry. Sorry. So item E is the discussion on Illinois House Bill 0156. Education on menstrual hygiene products. How did I miss this? Maybe because it makes me uncomfortable. Administration will provide an update on this mandate. This mandate amends the school code, provides that a school district shall make menstrual, rather than feminine hygiene products available at no cost to students in each bathroom of every school building rather than in bathrooms of school buildings.
Yeah, we just wanted to, we sent out to the community. We are updating the products in all of our bathrooms at LBES and LBMS, excluding the kindergarten bathrooms, to be in compliance with this new legislation. I just wanted to make the board aware. We talked as an administrative team for a long time about the best way to implement this new requirement. Feel that the machines that we ordered are discreet and will serve the purpose. We are limiting our comments to students to indicate there's no need for them to interact with the new equipment unless they know what it is for, which is covered in our health curriculum at the appropriate grades. And we, of course, as you know, gave parents the opportunity to talk with their children prior to the installation as well. So if there's any questions or comments, or you want to talk through any of this, please just let me know.
Anybody? Anybody? All right, now I'm going to move on. Action items. Agenda item 9A, the approval of student fees as discussed by Mr. Khan earlier. Any further discussions, questions or comments on student fees? May I have a motion to approve the student use fees for the 22-23 school year as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second.
Second, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Lauren Hirsch.
Yes.
Carrie Steinbach.
Yes.
Tim Penich.
Yes.
Amy Connell Donahue.
Yes.
Andy Duran.
Yes. Tentatively, yes, yes.
Ann Hill. Yes. Mark Berry.
Yes. Motion's approved. Approval of building use fees for 22-23 year as discussed earlier in our discussion. Any questions, comments, or anything want to clarify on that? May I have a motion to approve the building use fees for the 22-23 school year as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Carrie Steinbach.
Yes.
Tim Penich.
Yes.
Amy Connell Donahue.
Yes.
Andy Duran.
Yes.
Ann Hill. Yes. Mark Berry.
Yes.
Lauren Hirsch.
Yes.
Motion's approved. Item C is the approval of the district legislative advocacy work that we are doing with 67 and 115 that Andy presented to us so thoroughly. Any additional questions, comments, or concerns on that? May I have a motion to approve the tri-district legislative advocacy work with District 67 and District 115? Period. Sorry.
Second.
A roll call vote.
I'm sorry, who moved what?
Ann or Amy and
Gotcha. Thank you.
I think that could be an all in favor.
That can be an all.
Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. The motion is approved. I love those all in favors. We don't get to do those very much. So I guess you will share that with his name.
John. I'll call
John,
him tomorrow.
yeah, let him know. That's awesome. All right, personnel report. I'm gonna pull it up, bear with me.
I got it right here.
Okay. So this month's personnel report includes one non-licensed new hire, Ronan Berg, a teaching assistant at the elementary school effective January 25th, replacing Marilyn Rodriguez at a price of $17 an hour. It includes one licensed new hire, John Reifenberg, a permanent substitute at the elementary school and middle school effective January 4. It's a new position per our new staffing plan at a rate of $34.28 per hour. Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns about the personnel report? I have a motion to approve the January 26, 2022 to January 25th, 2022 personnel report as presented by the administration.
So moved.
Second.
Can we have a roll call vote on that?
Amy Connell Donahue.
Yes.
Andy Duran.
Yes.
Ann Hill. Yes. Mark Berry.
Yes.
Lauren Hirsch.
Yes.
Carrie Steinbach.
Yes.
Tim Penich.
Yes.
Motion's approved. Item E is the consent agenda. This month's consent agenda includes the open session meeting minutes from the December 14th, 2021 Truth and Taxation hearing, the December 14th, 2021 regular Board of Education meeting, the closed session meeting minutes from the December 14th, 2021 regular Board of Ed meeting, the treasurer's report, the impressed report, the bills report, and the P card report. Is there any of those reports that anybody would like pulled for separate discussion out of the consent agenda? Not hearing any. May I have a motion to approve the January 25th, 2022 consent agenda as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Roll call vote, please.
Andy Duran,
Yes.
Anne Hill, yes. Mark Barry.
Yes.
Lauren Hirsch.
Yes.
Carrie Steinbach.
Yes.
Tim Penich.
Yes.
Amy Connell Donahue.
Yes.
Motion's approved. That is all of our our action items for this evening. Item 10 is FOIA requests. We have a FOIA report in our board packet that anybody can see if they're interested in. There was one that I thought was a little interesting, asking for copies of documentation of remote learning equipment reported as missing.
Strange.
Thought that was
Investigative
unusual.
reporting.
Any
As did we.
insights to that? That's just from ABC 7 Chicago. Maybe they're doing some reporting on that. And we, as always, we end our meetings with the opportunity for public comment. Anybody, even on the board or in the audience, would like to make a public comment? Or on Zoom, if there are people watching, they can make public comment. Have anybody, Shelley, out there? Okay. Not hearing any. I want to thank everybody. And again, thank you to everybody employed working in this district. We really appreciate what you do every day. Thank you so much. So at 8:30 PM, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Nobody ever opposes. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you for everything.